The moon's far side is not dark. It is only hidden from us. Last week it sent a signal while Earth blocked every usual source of interference, and I logged it, labeled it, and tried to forget it until the next window. Tonight, the window opens again. I am on night shift at the small dish on the ridge, hands on a keyboard that sticks on the R key, a thermos of coffee cooling on the console, the spectrum viewer scrolling a slow waterfall that looks like rain if you stare too long. The dish motors hum through the concrete. The control room smells like warm dust and metal. I start the recorder at 1:07 a.m. and wait for the moon to move the quiet shield over my head. The facility is small compared to the big DSN complexes. Our dish is 30 meters, a patient white bowl pointed at the brightest object in the sky that, for our work, acts like a lid. Far side time is our time. I run the interference checklist by habit. Cell towers, satellites, aircraft transponders, lightning maps, local electronics audit. The RFI map shows a blank C where the moon will sit. I put a narrow filter around the first frequency we flagged last week, 1.42 gigahertz, near the hydrogen line, the place radio astronomers treat like a public park. Someone chose that band for a reason, someone or something. The last run gave me a hair-thin spike that rose from the noise exactly when the moon covered our station from Earth's side. Not a reflection, not harmonics from a satellite, not bleed from our own gear. I chased it for 40 minutes before it ended without drift. The log sat on my desk all week under a pile of requisitions, a printed spectrum with a pencil note in the margin. Not random. The words annoyed me when I saw them. I do not write conclusions on paper. I write times and numbers. Tonight I will earn those words, or erase them. I lock the feed horn temperature, run the cryo check, and set the recorder to split to both the server and a portable drive. I prefer the redundancy. I route a reference clock from our rubidium standard, then back into the digitizer. I add a small tone at a harmless offset and measure the system. The dish tracks on schedule. The moon climbs. The clock in the corner ticks over to 1:19 a.m. I can hear the building exhale as the air conditioning cuts off. The first hint of it comes as a straight line drawn with an invisible ruler on the waterfall. No rise, no fade. It is just there. The power is low but steady. I narrow the bandwidth to keep the noise down and let the integration time climb. The line sharpens. I split the stream and run a fast Fourier transform on one copy, a matched filter bank on the other, and a dumb recorder on the third, because simple tools are honest when clever ones get fancy. I circle the line with my mouse, not because it helps, but because my hand has to do something. I call the duty phone that sits on the rack by the door. Maya answers on the second ring as if she never sleeps. I tell her it is back. She asks for the live feed. I send it. She goes quiet, which is what she does when she sees what I see. She asks for the exact center frequency, down to the hertz. I read it out. She asks for the timestamp from the rubidium clock. I read that out too. She says, "Hold your pointing and do not touch the LO." I say I will not touch anything. She hangs up to call the larger network. I do touch one thing. I open a second receiver at 2.2 gigahertz S-band because a note in last week's data suggested a weak side thread that sat there like a trace shadow. I do not expect to hear it again. I keep it open anyway. The main line at 1.42 holds steady for 5 minutes, then begins to do something that makes me lean in. The power pulses at a fixed interval. The interval is long for radio, short for human attention. 12 seconds on the nose. 12 on, 12 off. 12 on, 12 off. 12 times. Then silence for 60. Then the cycle repeats. I start a simple DMOD script that measures the on-off timing down to microseconds. I think of prime numbers, but shove that thought away because it is a romantic thought and not useful. The intervals are too regular for orbit-based Doppler changes. When the long gap ends, a second pattern starts. This one is not on-off. It is phase. The carrier flips by exact steps as if someone is turning a knob in perfect clicks. I let the script write the sequence out as integers. It looks like coordinates once you group the numbers. It looks like pairs, longitude and latitude, except not in degrees and not for Earth. I convert the pairs to selenographic coordinates almost without meaning to. Schrödinger Basin sits near those numbers, on the far side near the rim of a great scar. I do not say this aloud. I mark it with a flag in the log. I pull a small book down from the shelf because the network is offline inside this room, and I do not want to lose the hour to hunting. The book is a dog-eared lunar atlas with marks from older hands. I open to the page with the basin. The numbers fit close enough to raise the hair on my arms if I indulged that kind of thing. I do not. I write it down. At 1:28 a.m., the S-band receiver clicks alive with a murmur that is almost there and then gone. I widen the S-band filter and slow the waterfall. The murmur repeats, not a carrier, not a tone, something like a stretched-out whisper. I route it to a separate recorder and let it run with a longer buffer. I tune back to the main band and watch the phase steps finish their sequence. The main carrier cuts, and in the silence, I time the round-trip delay to the moon out of habit. 2.56 seconds. The empty gap feels measured. My chair creaks when I shift. Maya comes back on the line with a clipped voice that means she has other ears with her. She asks for my gain settings and the exact sky position. I read them off. She asks if I can maintain lock for another hour. I say yes, as long as nothing breaks. She says a friend at Goldstone is listening and does not see it. I say it will not show from Earth's side because the moon is doing the shield for us. She says she knows that and says sorry under her breath. She tells me to watch for a prompt. A prompt from what? She does not say. She hangs up. The S-band murmur sharpens into a grid if you look at it sideways, not an image, a frame. I slow the stream more and realize it is broken into blocks with small markers at the edge of each block. I have seen this pattern in slow scan images from old spacecraft. This is not the same, but it rhymes with those, and the rhyme is enough to guide the next move. I write a quick decoder that guesses where the block begins and ends and lets me move the boundaries by hand. On the fourth try, the blocks align. The screen fills with a dull rectangle of gray that shifts one shade at a time. Gray is data. Gray is bits I can turn into numbers. I map the values to a simple scale and render a crude picture. The first pass is noise. The second pass is less noise. The third pass shows a flat field with a line through it at a shallow angle. 2 bright nodes at the ends. A dim grid beneath. It looks like a floor with rails. It looks like something inside something. The fourth pass shows a new line at the far edge, rising, as if the camera moved a few inches. I type without looking away and lock the framing. I write in the log, S-band block map, low-rate frame drift consistent with a camera on a gimbal. I feel the need to mark that I do not know this for sure. I add a note, apparent perspective shift. I keep the recorder running and tell myself not to interpret. The next set of frames adds detail. The rails are not rails, they are coils. Coils set into channels cut into a surface that does not look like rock or polymer. It has a matte texture, almost dead, with no reflections. The 2 bright nodes at the coil ends flare and drop in a slow cycle. If I had to name it, I would call it charging. The main band lights again at 1:34 a.m. with a different personality. The carrier is higher by a clean 1 kHz step. The phase is no longer flipping, it is sweeping. The sweep is not smooth. It jumps in a staircase that matches a simple code I have used myself to jog stuck equipment. The signal is knocking. Knock, knock. I do not like the human shape that thought takes, so I erase it and write, excitation sequence evident. The S-band image frame brightens at the coil ends in time with the knocks. The round numbers slide into a neat column in my head. Something down there is responding to what we get hit with up here. I can send. The dish is not supposed to transmit without a long line of clearances, but we have a maintenance mode at very low power for servo tests. The maintenance mode uses S-band. I look at the toggle as if it might speak. I do not touch it. I call Maya again. I tell her what I see and what I could do. She listens without interrupting. Then she says, 2 seconds, Alex. She calls me by name only when she wants me to hold. The line goes dead for a breath and returns with a second voice, an older man who speaks as if he is already writing the memo in his head. He gives me an authorization code and reads the words test chirp and 1 millisecond and safe low EIRP. He tells me to log exact power. He tells me to aim at the center of the moon's disk and not at the coordinate I have. I say that means we will miss. He says aim at the center. I tell him I understand. I arm the transmitter with both hands on the switches because I want to respect the motion. I set a 1 millisecond chirp that sweeps a narrow band in the clear, low power, a harmless ping. I count down from 5 and press the key. The carrier meter tickles, and the dish sings a note I can feel in my feet through the concrete pad. The room goes quiet by contrast when it stops. I look at the recorder clock. 2.56 seconds. The S-band image frame flares at the coil ends, as if someone opened a valve. The main band at 1.42 shivers and then holds. The round trip time is exact. I write it down twice. I send 3 more chirps spaced by 10 seconds. The response is repeatable and slightly stronger each time. The image frames move again, the camera gliding on a smooth arc that reveals a broader floor beyond the coils. I see other channels, empty, waiting. The surface has repeating marks in a simple grid. No text, no symbols, just alignment marks small enough to be there for assembly. The coil channels meet at a hub that sits flush with the surface, a dark circle with a seam around it. I do not like the word hatch. I use hub, I write hub. The older man on the line tells me to stop transmitting. I stop. He asks me to read back the logs to the second. I do. He thanks me in a voice that shows me he did not expect thanks back. He does not hang up. I keep recording. The main band slides into a new pattern I do not recognize. It is not on-off, not phase steps, not sweep. It is irregular bursts that look chaotic until you look at the gaps. The gaps are regular. The chaos is within the regularity, like a hand shaking under a metronome. I realize it is error correction, repeated attempts at filling missing blocks. And the missing blocks are always the ones I can supply if I transmit. Whoever designed this expected loss and built in a way to ask for a nudge. I do not need a call to tell me what to do. I ask for permission anyway, because we do not play with dishes like this without rules. The older man tells me to hold. He confers with silence. He returns with an okay and the same low power limit. I set the chirp to the missing blocks and fire 1 clean millisecond. The S-band image updates with a new section of floor, a sweep past the hub that shows a thin raised ring. The main band quiets for a beat, and then returns with a different character entirely. A handshake, preamble tones in a simple ratio, in a sequence size that feels designed by an engineer who thinks in clean arrays. My throat is dry. I put the cup to my mouth and find it empty. I put it down. The handshake completes with a block that any radio person would recognize even without training. A header that gives you a place to stand. It announces a frame size, a clock rate, and a checksum. It uses no language. It uses numbers any species with a clock and a ruler would share. I feed it into the decoder, and the gray picture becomes a crisp grid with real contrast. The camera tilts and looks past the coils into an open space that does not have edges inside the current field of view. The surface has expansion joints cut in perfect arcs that meet at the hub. The hub opens by 3 degrees and stops. A sliver of black sits in the seam. I send no more. I do not want to be the reason a machine moves. Everyone on the call says nothing for a long minute. I hear breathing that might be the older man or might be my own line. He says, "Do not transmit again." He is polite, which means someone above him is listening now. I say I will not. He asks how confident I am about the coordinate I noted earlier. I say I will not put a percentage on it, but the numbers aim at the rim of Schrödinger. He repeats my words in a careful order and says thank you. Maya murmurs my name, as if to ask if I am all right. I tell her I am fine and keep my eyes on the screen. The next frames arrive with a new artifact in the corner. A faint reflection that blooms and fades in a shape that looks too clean to be noise. I freeze a frame and move the brightness. The shape is the curve of our own dish, inverted and tiny, a ghost in the feed from the far side. The camera in that chamber is not a camera in the usual sense. It is a field sensor that sees energy as geometry. It saw my chirp touch the coils. It saw the dish that sent it as a soft arc in its near field. The thought lands without romance. We are in the picture. I write, chamber field imager detects incident E-field geometry. Reflection pattern matches our aperture. I want to add a sentence about being seen, but that is drama. I keep to function. The main band shifts again to a higher rate. My decoder stumbles and then catches. The frames stop being images and become tables. Columns of numbers scroll across the console. I recognize the structure of a calibration bed. The chamber is running through a list of checks. Inductance at the coils. Field uniformity. Junction resistance at the hub seam. Environmental variables that I do not know how to read, but that likely match pressure, temperature, vibration. It is a startup checklist. Startups end with go or fail. This one ends with a list I do not like. It is sparse. Nothing moves. The hub stays at 3 degrees. The coils hold a small charge and stop. The imager shows no additional geometry. Then a single number appears at the bottom of the table. It is a time, not hours. It is offset from our clock by a constant that matches light travel to a point behind the moon, a fraction of the distance past the far side. L2. The list types a coordinate that is not on the surface. It points to a relay position. Someone built this to speak to a partner that sits where we parked our own relay satellites. We cannot speak to L2 from here through the moon. We do not have that angle tonight. I say so on the line. The older man says he knows. He asks me to maintain lock to see if the chamber repeats. It does. The same list, the same clean request to a partner that is not there. I feel the idea form with the heaviness of a decision I do not want to make. If I were reckless, I would try a long chirp to mimic a relay. I would not be careful enough and would dump power into a machine I do not understand. I keep my hands at my sides and watch the minutes tick. The chamber gives up at 1:52 a.m. The coils bleed down to baseline. The imager field goes flat. The main band returns to the first simple carrier. The pattern restarts from the first step from last week, as if it never happened. I start a new file and write new cycle in the notes. Maya whispers the thought that we might need a real relay to reply. The older man does not reply to that. I hear a door close on his side, the soft gust of a seal. The line goes quiet. I keep recording through the next cycle. When it reaches the place where the coils woke last time, nothing happens. The maintenance chirps were the missing blocks. Without them, the chamber sits quiet and the list never appears. The main band completes its sequence and ends at 2:11 a.m. The S-band whispers for a long minute after, then thins to noise. The waterfall is a steady rain again. The dish hums as the tracking slews back to a stow position. I exhale only when the motors stop. I realize I have not moved from the chair for an hour. My legs complain when I stand. I do not indulge them. I stretch, slow and quiet. I package the files with checksums and write the log in the dry style my supervisor likes. I list times, settings, frequencies, coordinates, authorizations, power levels, environmental notes, errors, and corrections. I do not write the word alive. I do not write the word awake. I do not write what I felt in my hands when the dish vibrated under the chirp and the chamber answered with light. I lock the portable drive in the safe and send the encrypted link for the server copy through the line the building keeps for moments where the value of secrecy outruns convenience. Maya calls me back at 2:24 a.m. She does not ask how I am. She asks if I can run the same setup tomorrow night. I say yes. She says the network will request a parallel session from Canberra if the geometry allows. She says the older man will write a request to an agency that runs a relay at L2. She says words that mean politics without saying the word politics. She thanks me. She calls me Alex again. I hear her swallow. She says, "Do not do anything new without a call." I say I will not. I mean it. The control room feels larger when the screens drop to standby. I turn off the desk lamp and the room goes dim except for the rectangular glow from the rack displays that show temperature and status like a heartbeat on a bedside monitor. I check the pad for any grease marks or tools out of place because that is how sloppy work creeps in. Everything is where it should be. I pick up the thermos and screw the lid on even though it is empty because I do not like loose ends. I step out into the night. The air is thin and cold on the ridge. The dish crouches over me like a pale hill, motionless now, soundless. The moon hangs as a bright cutout in the west, its face we know turned toward us, its far rooms sealed behind that curve. I stand still and count the seconds until the wind catches the cable runs and makes a light chime. Somewhere down in the trees, a fox barks once and stops. My phone buzzes in my pocket with messages I do not read yet. I keep my eyes on the moon until it reaches a branch. Then I walk back inside. The door seals with a click that feels too loud in the empty hall. I sit down again and run the frames from the chamber with the brightness pulled low and the contrast high. I look at the hub seam and wonder about tools that can cut a circle that clean in material that dead. I wonder how long it has sat there. I wonder if anyone else has heard it. The rational part of my head lists prior work on far-side radio quiet zones, old Apollo orbital imagery, newer maps from Chinese orbiters, everything that would have shown a structure if it were obvious. The rational list ends with the plain fact that imager types do not see what field sensors see. You only see what you ask for with the equipment you have. That is not a mystery. That is a limitation. At 3:03 a.m., the building phone rings on a line that only a few people know. The older man again. He says a request is approved to route a small relay beam through L2 tomorrow. using a research platform that can do a very low-rate burst. He says it will be brief and cautious. He says my dish will be part of the receive chain, no transmit. He says keep my team small. I say yes to everything. He hangs up without anything like good night. I admire the tidiness even as my own mind scatters. I print 2 frames from the chamber at different times and place them side by side. In the second one, the surface has a faint ripple 12 channels away from the hub. I check if it is a decoder artifact. It is not. The ripple lines up with a new value in the environment column that looks like vibration or pressure. Something touched the structure far from the camera. It could be thermal settling. It could be seismic activity. The far side is not dead in that way either. Mountains still breathe there. Rock still shifts. I log it, not because I know what it means, but because once you do this enough, you learn that small marks matter months later. I sleep in a narrow room down the hall for an hour with my boots on and my phone under my cheek. I wake before the alarm, rinse my face in cold water, and brew bad coffee. At 6:08 a.m., I hand the dish to the day tech with a thin summary and the instruction to call me if any maintenance touches the feed. He nods and uses his pen to draw a box around the note, which is his way of promising. I drive down the ridge on the single-lane road the facility shares with the fire watch. The valley opens below with its flat fields and the white stripe of river. The world looks normal. I keep both hands on the wheel. I say nothing to the radio. I do not go home. I go to the university lab near town where we built our first receiver when the grant arrived. The room smells like solder and old coffee and plastic. The students are gone at night. I pull the prototype off the shelf and check the boards for dust, then check the coupling caps for bulge, then check the FPGA for a sticky pin. I plug it in and load a copy of the decoder I used last night. The old system works. The screen fills with a test pattern. I put the box in my bag. I label a notebook with the date and the word L2 in block letters. By noon, my inbox fills with questions from people who do not know what to ask yet. I answer none of them. I send one message to Maya asking for the relay window time and the expected rate. She replies with a single line, 141, 143, 128 BPS CW preamble. She adds a smile that reads forced at the end, because she knows I prefer numbers to faces. I type back a wordless thumbs up and feel foolish for it. I shut the laptop and walk around the block twice without looking up. The town eats lunch and shops and looks at screens, and no one looks at the moon in daylight. That feels good. It lets the night keep its job. The second night I come in early. I test the transmitter to confirm the interlock works, then put tape over the toggle in case my hand forgets itself. I set the recorder to a wider band in case the relay uses a different offset from the chamber. I print the previous logs in case the network drops and we need reference numbers. I set the thermos down and leave it closed until I earn it. The dish tracks. The moon takes its place. The ridge wind has a steadier gust, and the cable runs sing a longer tone. I pretend not to hear it, because it makes me think of instruments with strings, and that is a beautiful thought that does not belong in this room when I need to be precise. At 1:39 a.m., the relay preamble appears faint and clean at the edge of the S-band, a small series of tones in fixed ratios that step on exact seconds. The chamber answers before I can call it an answer. The coils light, not with the lag from the chirps, but in sync with the preamble tones. The hub opens another 3 degrees and stops. A narrow slot appears that is so black my monitor shows it as an absence even at boosted gain. The main band fills with a header I did not see last night. The table is short. The variables are few. A new field sits at the bottom as a single digit, 1. It holds there for 5 heartbeats long enough to count, then flips to 2. Counters are counters. You do not need to be a poet to know a count-up when you see it. I track the clock against the counter and see the lag is not solar, not lunar, not tied to our seconds. It is tied to the relay cadence. The chamber is using the relay as a ready signal. It has waited for a partner to tap a spoon on a table. Now it taps back. The hub opens to 5 degrees. A sound in the building makes me turn my head. The sound is from the rack fans spooling up under higher load. I look back and my eyes blur for a blink. I rub them with my knuckles and everything returns to blocks and numbers. The coil charge rises to a threshold. The imager shows a faint halo around the hub as if the field lines tighten there. The older man on the line says one word, copy. The relay preamble ends. A low-rate block begins, passes, ends. The chamber's counter freezes at 9. The hub stops. The charge holds and then bleeds down. The imager loses definition and returns to flat gray. I let out air slow. The main band cuts to the quiet we had before. I do not speak because I am waiting for someone else to name what did not happen. Maya says it for us. It wanted more. The older man says nothing for a while, then says, "We gave enough." I respect the limit. I also timetable what we learned. The chamber expected a relay at L2. It ran a startup checklist. It held at a mechanical stop. It did not proceed without sustained instruction. It did nothing on its own in the absence of our hand. That is the practical summary. The one I will write in a report. The part I will not write is what I felt in the room when the counter ticked, and the hub moved in small degrees that measured out to a purpose someone built and left, and did not entirely hide. That part stays off paper, not because I am scared of words, because reports answer to function. After the relay window closes, the chamber sends a single frame on the main band that is not like the others. It is a map, not an image. A simple top-down schematic, unitless, with a line that curves from a point at the rim of Schrödinger to a dot behind the moon, with a small circle along that line labeled with a single tick mark. It does not use numbers we know. It uses proportion. It is telling us where to put something. It is telling whoever watches how to complete a loop. I label the frame and lock it, and send it as a still to the older man with a note. Interpret with caution. He does not reply. The rest of the night is quiet. The moon rolls on. The dish settles. I turn off the transmitter interlock light and peel the tape off the toggle, fold it on itself, and put it in the trash with a small feeling of ceremony I pretend not to have. I drive down the ridge in the first dull blue of morning and park by the river and sit with the engine off. A heron stands in the shallows without moving. The water carries branches past without hurry. Cars hiss on the far road. I think about how many rooms sit under how many surfaces we look at every day and do not see because we did not ask them the right question in the right way. That thought is not romantic either. It is just a fact tied to work. At noon, our group meets in the smallest conference room with the worst projector. The older man appears on a screen from a place without windows. He speaks in careful lines. He says we will not transmit again without a chain of approvals that will take longer than most people's attention spans. He says a science team will draft passive observation plans. He says our logs will be sealed for a time. He says the words security posture and heritage artifact and unknown hazard class. He does not say alien. No one says that word because it is not a helpful word. We stick to structure. We stick to signals. We stick to the grinding work of not making conclusions before the work is done. I sign 2 papers that say I will not talk about specifics, except to the people in this room, or on that line. I do not mind. Secrets are not a thrill in this business. They are delays. I take the portable drive from the safe and hand it to a courier with a hard case and a habit of not making eye contact. He thanks me with a nod that means a job, not gratitude. I watch him leave. Then I go back to the control room because the dish always needs checks, and the next night is another chance to learn something new without touching the hot plate. For 3 nights, the far side sends the same preamble when the moon covers us, and the chambers do their list and stop at the point where a partner must be. We do not send. We do not call the relay. We record. We map small movements in the numbers that might be thermal shifts or small changes in the chamber's resting tension. On the 4th night, the chamber does not run the list. It sends the map again. This time, the dot along the curve is larger. It places an X beside it that is a small mark and not a letter. My chest goes tight for a second. And then I remember I do not write chest words in logs. I write the mark down with coordinates in the frame if I can derive them. On the 5th night, the map does not come at all. The chamber sends a different thing, an array of regular pulses in a pattern that is not a count and not random. I run every test I trust. Maya runs hers at home on a copy I sent. In the pattern, if you group the pulses by the phase step of the main carrier and divide by the gap length, you get pairs again, then triples, then pairs. The numbers match the position of our dish over 3 nights relative to the moon's face to within the error of our own mechanical wobble. The chamber is tracking us, not by light, by field. It sees our aperture in its domain and notes it, not in a table called gratitude, but in a book called context. I ask for a break the 6th night, not for rest, but to give the chamber a night without us. Canberra covers. The report reads flat. No preamble detected during shield window. That means the source is not omnidirectional. It is not broadcasting for anyone to hear. It is talking in a thin beam. It is pointing where it wants attention. It pointed at us for a week. I do not think that is luck. I think that is consequence. We pinged it. It looked back. Now it waits. There is a way this ends that fits a certain story shape. It is the one where we cannot help ourselves and send more and open the hub and wake something and then regret it. That shape is lazy. The world uses the boring shape more often. We stop. We document. We argue. We fill rooms with paper. We take careful steps, and the chamber waits. That is the shape that earns sleep. That is the shape that keeps dishes safe. I accept it with a small ache I do not name to anyone. 2 weeks later, a memo lands in my inbox with a new header. It says a small probe at L2 will perform a passive shadow of a preamble at a safe margin outside the chamber's map, a geometry where the chamber should see shape but not power. The memo calls it a presence acknowledgement. The schedule is in 3 days at 1:41 a.m. The memo tells me to prepare to record at higher dynamic range with tight timing because even a hint of response matters. The memo says nothing about doors or coils or hubs. It says signal only. Good. I know how to do signal. On the night of the test, the dish moves with the smoothness of a new car door. The moon is bright in the window. The relay preamble appears like a line of polite knocks. We do not transmit. The chamber returns with a single block that is so small it would slip past anyone who is not looking for it. The block holds a number equal to the difference between the preamble's measured source position and the position in the map from the chamber itself. A correction, a small request to center a mark. The probe at L2 does not move. The chamber waits 15 seconds and sends the correction again. Then it stops. I sit back for the first time in hours and let the fans and hums return to background. I write the words that started this run beside tonight's date, in the margin of the new printed spectrum, not random. I put the page under the glass weight that keeps loose paper from curling on the console. I listen to the wind touch the cable runs. I think about hidden rooms under familiar faces, and about how some machines wait longer than any single person's patience to be noticed, and about how noticing is not the same as understanding. I shut down the chain, back up the drives, and lock the safe. On the way out, I stop under the dish and look up. The bowl is still. The stars around the moon are faint. The air smells like cold dust and pine. I put my hand on the concrete footing. It holds the heat from the day like a mild animal, and I pull my hand back because that is a simile, and I promised myself not to turn work into that. I smile at the foolishness of thinking about words when the far side sends numbers. I walk to the car. I leave the ridge slow. The moon rides my shoulder in the mirror. Whatever waits behind that face in that chamber, under that seam, will wait. Waiting is part of how good machines live long. It is part of how careful people keep them from doing harm. If this ever becomes public, I will not use the word alien in the first sentence. I will write about a signal in a protected band, a response to a safe chirp, a chamber built for fields and not for eyes, and a partner point in a quiet place where our own relays sit. I will write about distances and times and the patience of a plan that could outlast several careers. The part where I sat in a chair and counted seconds while a circle in a floor opened 3 degrees and stopped will not carry the weight it does in my head. That is fine. I do not need it to. I need the data to hold when other hands push on it. I need the numbers to stand in rooms that do not care about how I felt. For now, the moon is quiet again. The far side keeps its rooms. The dish waits for commands, and the ridge waits for wind and morning. I lock the door, check it, and check it again. I drive down into the valley, where lights line the river, and people sleep without thinking about coils or hubs or relays. The road curves, and for a moment the moon drops behind a stand of dark trees, and the windshield is only night and the faint reflection of my own face.